The town that still burns beneath the ground. There is a town in Pennsylvania where the ground is still warm, not from sunlight, not from summer heat, but from a fire that has been burning beneath it for more than 60 years. If you stand on what used to be a quiet residential street in Centralia, you won't hear traffic, you won't see children riding bicycles. In some places, faint wisps of steam rise from cracks in the earth, especially on cold mornings. The road that once connected neighbors is fractured, slowly surrendering to time and heat below. Centralia was never meant to disappear. It was a working-class mining town like many others across America. But in 1962, something began underground that would quietly change everything. And what followed would turn an ordinary town into one of the most unusual stories in modern American history. Historical context. Centralia sits in Columbia County, in the coal-rich region of northeastern Pennsylvania. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, towns like this were built around one thing: anthracite coal. The mines provided jobs, stability, and a sense of identity. Families settled here for generations. Churches were built, schools filled with children. Main Street carried the rhythm of ordinary American life. By the 1950s, however, the coal industry had already begun to decline. Mechanization, economic shifts, and changing energy demands were reshaping communities across the region. Centralia's population had peaked earlier in the century, and by the early 1960s, it was smaller but still functioning. A modest, tight-knit town of just over 1,000 residents. Beneath Centralia lay a network of abandoned mine tunnels, some dating back decades. These underground passages stretched quietly beneath homes, streets, and public buildings. For years, they were simply part of the town's forgotten infrastructure, unseen but largely ignored. That changed in May 1962, when a routine decision involving a landfill would ignite something no one fully understood at the time. What began as a small fire would prove nearly impossible to control, and Centralia would never be the same. Development. In May of 1962, the town council authorized the clearing of a local landfill located in an abandoned strip mine pit just outside Centralia. The goal was simple: clean up accumulated trash before the upcoming Memorial Day holiday. It was common practice at the time to burn landfill waste as a method of disposal. Volunteers and workers set the trash on fire, expecting it to extinguish as it had in previous years. But beneath that landfill lay exposed openings to old mine shafts. Despite attempts to put out the flames, the fire slipped through cracks in the rock and into the interconnected network of underground coal veins. What seemed manageable above ground became something far more complex below it. At first, the signs were subtle. Residents reported strange odors, smoke drifted from small fissures in the soil. Some noticed that basement temperatures felt unusually warm. Officials attempted to contain the fire multiple times throughout the 1960s using excavation and flushing techniques. Each effort proved either incomplete or too costly to sustain. The fire was not dramatic. It did not explode into catastrophe overnight. Instead, it spread quietly through the coal seams beneath the town, fueled by one of the most combustible natural resources in the region. And as the years passed, the ground itself began to respond. What had once been stable began to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. But the warning signs were becoming harder to ignore. Escalation. By the late 1970s, the underground fire was no longer an invisible problem. Carbon monoxide levels inside some homes began to rise to dangerous levels. Residents reported persistent fumes seeping into basements. Vegetation in certain areas started to wither as the soil temperature increased. Measurements taken in the early 1980s revealed ground temperatures exceeding several hundred degrees Fahrenheit in some locations. Then came the moment that changed public perception. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Dombowski was playing in his backyard when the ground beneath him suddenly gave way. A sinkhole, approximately 150 feet deep, opened without warning, releasing hot gases from below. Todd was pulled to safety by a relative, but the incident made national headlines. For many, it was the first time Centralia's underground fire became a story beyond Pennsylvania. State and federal authorities began to reassess the situation. Studies confirmed that the fire was extensive and could burn for decades, possibly centuries. Efforts to extinguish it would require enormous financial investment, with no guarantee of success. The question was no longer whether the fire could be stopped, it was whether the town could remain. In 1984, the federal government approved a relocation program offering compensation to residents willing to leave their homes. For some, it was a difficult but practical decision. For others, it felt like surrendering generations of history. And slowly, house by house, Centralia began to empty. But not everyone agreed to go.
Central event. In the mid-1980s, relocation became more than a proposal. It became policy. After years of investigation and mounting safety concerns, the U.S. Congress approved funding to relocate Centralia's remaining residents. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania began purchasing properties through eminent domain. Home values were assessed, compensation packages were offered. Entire streets were scheduled for demolition. For many families, the decision was deeply personal. This was not simply real estate, it was memory. It was generations of birthdays, marriages, and funerals. Churches that had stood for decades closed their doors. The local post office, a symbol of continuity, would eventually shut down as well. One by one, houses were vacated and torn down. Sidewalks ended abruptly, streetlights stood without purpose. In some areas, only foundations remained, rectangular impressions marking where homes once stood. By the early 1990s, most of Centralia's population had relocated. In 1992, the state formally condemned the borough, declaring it unsafe for habitation. Though a small number of residents challenged the order in court, the town's legal status was ultimately dissolved in 2017. The fire beneath Centralia had not been extinguished. Instead, the solution was removal, not of the flames, but of the people. And what remained was something unusual in modern America. A town that technically still existed on maps, but functionally no longer lived. Yet even then, the story did not end, because absence has its own presence.
Once carried traffic now lead to open fields. Nature has slowly reclaimed what infrastructure left behind. In certain areas, warning signs caution visitors about unstable ground and toxic gases. The fire still burns below, moving slowly through coal seams that experts estimate could smolder for another century or more. Highway Route 61, once a direct path through town, was permanently closed after visible cracks and steam vents made it unsafe. Over time, the abandoned stretch of road became a curiosity, covered in graffiti and visited by those drawn to unusual landscapes. Eventually, even that road was removed. Centralia's zip code was discontinued, its municipal government dissolved. On paper, it ceased to function as a town. Yet it remains part of Pennsylvania's history, a case study in environmental risk, industrial legacy, and the limits of human control over the land. For former residents, the loss was not abstract. It meant leaving behind family cemeteries, church communities, and memories tied to specific streets. The fire transformed more than geography. It altered identity. And in doing so, Centralia became something rare. A modern American ghost town created not by war or economic collapse, but by something burning quietly beneath the surface. What that says about permanence may be the most enduring part of its story. Reflection and soft CTA. Centralia is not a story of sudden destruction. It is a story of slow change, of decisions made with limited information, of industries that shaped entire communities, and of the quiet consequences that can unfold over decades. Across the United States, there are towns built around a single resource, a single industry, a single assumption about permanence. Centralia reminds us that what lies beneath the surface, whether geological, economic, or human, often matters more than what we see above it. The fire still burns, unseen but active. And though most of the people have gone, the story remains. Not as a warning alone, but as a reflection on resilience, adaptation, and the fragility of place. Unseen America exists to tell stories like this, real, documented chapters of American life that continue to shape communities long after headlines fade. If you value thoughtful, immersive history, consider subscribing, because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones still smoldering beneath the surface.